Hey guys, Pete here. Today I'm going to talk about the big questions that Dark Season 2 left unanswered, and what we can expect to get answers for in Season 3. Dark can be confusing, what with characters moving through time, and each season seems to ask more questions than it answers. In this video I'll discuss the biggest questions I want answers to after Season 2 of Dark, and you can let me know what yours are in the comments. Real quick, there's been a lot of spoilery images from Season 3 filming filtering out. I decided to leave those out of this video. I'm going to make a second video to discuss those rather than including them here. Some people don't like to see stuff like that in advance, so this seems like the best solution. This video will contain spoilers for everything through Season 2 though, so now that you've been warned, let's get into it. First question I have is, who is the new Martha and how does she change things? The big cherry on top twist of Season 2 was the arrival of an alternate Martha in Winden who saves younger Jonas from the apocalypse right after he watches his Martha, the Martha in his world, die. When Jonas asks this new character, "What time did you come from?" she answers, "The question isn't what time, the question is what world." Obviously this feels related to Claudia mentioning that she's seen a world without Jonas. And yeah, it looks like there is at least one more Winden or one more world that we have to explore. Just when you think you got a handle on the rules of time travel inside Dark's story and wrap your head around the deterministic structure where everything that's happened has always happened and there's no free will, here comes Martha number 2 when we know Martha number 1 has definitely just died. It's a turn that brings up a lot of questions. Is this the loophole that Adam has talked about? Are they going to her world right now? Has this always happened? The good news is more Martha, albeit not the same Martha, but bad news is that her existence definitely complicates things. I'm going to avoid going down rabbit holes here because there are a lot of other questions to get into, and I think they've given us exactly as much as they want us to know at this point. But let me know what you think in the comments about who Alt Martha is and how she changes things. One of the big debates is whether this has always happened or if this is the first time it's happened. I tend to think it always has, but let me know how you're sorting it out. The next question is, where did Katerina go? At the end of Season 2, we see Katerina open the door in the caves after being led there by some mysterious particles or whatever you wish to call them. She looked poised to move through the passage, so when will she end up? Her son Mikkel found himself stuck in 1986 after passing through the caves, and her husband Ulrich landed in 1953. Katerina was studying the maps and essentially doing all the same things Jonas was doing before he finally was successful in moving through the passage. But if that has any bearing on what time period she'll come out in on the other side, it's impossible to tell. I expect that she would be trying to get to her son Mikkel first and foremost, but it also seems unlikely that she has any control over where and when she goes when she passes through. Either way, she should be somewhere other than 2020 where the apocalypse just went down, and I'm looking forward to see what she gets into. The next question is Adam actually Jonas? And if so, how did he become Adam? I'm pretty firmly in the Adam is Jonas camp, and I don't spend very much time wondering if he might be someone else. But there's a lot of other people who think he could actually be Bartosh. One of the reasons I tend to think that he is who he says he is because it works pretty well that way. To me, it makes sense that the one pulling the strings would be the character we've been watching from the beginning, rather than there being some big hidden twist involved. Another reason I feel pretty comfortable with the story as it is because the official guide website that they put together says that he's Jonas, and I don't think that that is an elaborate hoax. I could be wrong, but it feels pretty honest from my point of view. What's more interesting to me is how over the 33 years, Stranger Jonas turns into Adam. We know that the Stranger was moved to save Magnus, Franziska, and Bartosh after he read the letter that young Noah gave him. We've seen his lair under the church that exists in 1921, and we've seen the photo of Sigmundus that was taken in that same year. Will Season 3 fill in those blanks for us? That leads directly into the next question, which is, when did Jonas, Magnus, Franziska, and Bartosh go? Since these characters are traveling with the Tannhaus device, we can assume that they're going to be jumping around some. I suppose that where they go initially to survive the apocalypse isn't that important. My question is, will they settle in 1888? and live there until we meet at least some of them again in 1921. That seems the most likely to me, but there could be many steps that unfold before they actually get there. Or they could never go there at all. Let me know what you think. And I mentioned the letter. That's another big question in my mind too. What does the letter say that young Noah delivered to Jonas? He said it came from Martha. That doesn't really make sense, unless of course it's the alt Martha who wrote it. It seems way more likely that Adam would have written it. But either way, is this the point where he learns something beyond what we see him do? As in, is this when he starts to really change to become Adam? It's hard to say. All I know is that there's a lot of letters flying around in this world, and I feel suspicious about every one of them, like who wrote them, why they wrote them, all the way out. The next question is, what role will Hannah play in the past? We know that Hannah ended up in 1954 at the end of season 2, and she seems to be indicating that she might stay there. There's also a hint that there may be some chemistry going on between her and the younger Egon, and we also know that Katerina is moving through time, and it would be interesting if those two cross paths again. I think it's safe to say that Hannah will stay in 1954 for a while, and I can't see her not getting mixed up with the other characters in that time. There are some theories about how things turn out based on some of those behind the scenes photos that the showrunners been posting that I mentioned in the beginning. Like I said, I won't get into those here, but check out the season 3 spoilers video that I'll make after this one for more on that. In the meantime, let me know how you think her presence in the 50s will change things. Next question, is there more to Alexander's story than we know? Alexander Tiedemann's history as Boris Niewald is mysterious. The circumstances around his arrival in Winden make it seem to me that there's definitely more going on with this character, but at the same time, he's done a lot of other stuff as well. So is it just coincidence that he shows up bleeding, running from the law next to the caves back in 1986 when he shows up? We know that something went down in Marburg. He's worried about being found out about that, but then we also have Clausen come into the story. To me, it appears that Boris Niewald and Alexander Kohler, Clausen's brother, were the two that were on the run. So what does that actually mean for the real Alexander Kohler? Did he go somewhere? And on top of that, we don't know where Alexander Tiedemann came from in a story where everyone is essentially connected. So I hope we find out more about his backstory. We'll have to wait and see. Speaking about not knowing where people come from, the next big question I have is, who are Noah and Agnes's parents? I did a detailed family tree about a week ago. If you haven't seen that video, you should check it out. But when I look at that, the biggest mystery to me is where Noah and Agnes came from in the first place. We saw them living with Erna in the 1921 timeline, but beyond that, we can't really trust anything they say as far as Agnes telling the Tiedemanns when she first moves in. She says her grandmother was from Winden, and I think that is probably true, but we don't know anything else about who her actual parents are. And when you look at the family tree, it has pretty big impact on how everybody's connected. She is the first Nielsen that we know of, and it just builds from there. Speaking of Noah, how did Noah, Elizabeth, and baby Charlotte get split up? This whole thing's pretty interesting. Of course, we know Elizabeth and Charlotte are each other's mothers. We know that these two are standing, getting ready to touch through the wormhole at the end of season 2. That's another question in itself. Where did they end up? But I'm curious because we've seen photos. What happens after the bunker? Do they stay in the regular timeline? Do they move into the future and have the child there? Do they go back somewhere and have the child? And then ultimately, how do they get separated? How does young Charlotte end up in the care of H.G. Tannhaus? That could be very well connected to the next question, which is, what's Claudia really trying to do? We have a pretty good idea that Adam is true when he says that he's at war with time. Of course, he lies about everything to get people to do different things, but I feel like he's probably trying to do something like that. He's trying to break the cycle. Claudia is more mysterious to me because several characters align themselves with her and then pull back and change sides. And we see that the biggest things that happen to Claudia as far as personal loss is the death of her father. And we know that Regina is dying and that she feels remorse about not spending more time with her. But what is she actually trying to accomplish? Is she trying to do something that we haven't quite understood yet? Because she does bring up the fact that she's seen the world without about Jonas, and then we eventually see her come to the end of her life. I tend to think that she exists based on what we've seen into the future. Like, she's definitely left that string wall behind in the bunker that Jonas comes across in 2053. Everything about what Elizabeth's doing when we run into her in the future seems to be influenced by Claudia. Those two would have been there together, building the future, if you will. So I think it's a pretty big mystery about what Claudia is actually trying to accomplish in relation to being at odds with Adam. Another thing I think about when I think about the people who survived, I mean, Regina has terminal cancer, so I'm expecting that she may die because of that. I don't think that healthcare is going to be improved in the near future, so she's got that to deal with. The next question then is, what happens to Peter after that? Charlotte's not there with him. She touches hands with Elizabeth. We don't know where she'll end up, but Peter will exist, and he's a mystery already. We don't know who his parents really are. We don't know where he came from, why he showed up in 87 instead of being born in Winden where everybody knew about it. So there's definitely some hints that he might play a really large role as being one of the survivors. That kind of segues into the next question, and that is, who are all the new actors going to play? An article on the Hollywood Reporter website listed several new actors that were added to the cast for season 3. We see them all here. We got a Barbara, a Hans deal, a Jacob deal, a Nina, a Sammy, and an Axel. Out of these, Sammy has been credited as playing a small role in season 1, episode 6. I believe he was this actor from Martha's play. But he's also being listed as a new character, which means that he's probably not still playing this exact same guy. This actor has been in some of those behind the scenes photos that I've been talking about, so you can learn more about those when I make the next video. Hans and Jacob are father and son in real life. For a show that does a good job of casting actors that look alike and they look like aged up versions of each other, hiring the actual father and son is pretty interesting. It seems more likely that they would play the same character at different ages rather than a father and son, because the only younger character who doesn't already have confirmed older versions is Bartosh, and I don't really see a resemblance there. The German website Movie Pilot made an interesting connection though. Sammy, Jacob, and Hans do kind of share a resemblance. Does that mean that we could be getting a new character that we're going to see at all 3 different ages at this point in the story? 2 of the other new actors are in the 70s, and this is how it connects to Peter. I thought of him right away since we know he survives in the bunker, and Axel Werner could be the older Peter. Barbara is hard to pin down because Claudia, Jenna, and Ines are the only female characters we've seen in that age group. She could be playing an older Charlotte, Elizabeth, or Agnes, but then there's a lot of other possibilities as well if you look at the family tree. Nina, on the other hand, is in her 50s, which lines her up pretty good to be an older version of Martha. But then we have to ask the question again, are we going to see that much of the alternative world that we see older versions of these people as well? These last questions, I'm just going to throw them out there and not go into them as deeply. Who is Celia? She first showed up at the end of season 1, and it feels like she has to be connected to someone in the 4 main families somehow. Next, who wrote the leather-bound notebook? Adam seems like a good candidate, but he seems rather interested in getting the missing pages back from Claudia at the same time. All we know for sure is that it's said to be written by someone who had already seen the past and the future, so who is the author? Was this character actually an older Bartosh? I tend to think it was, but if that's the case, why haven't they named him that yet? Have we already seen evidence of multiple worlds? The different calendars in the Conwald house is the best evidence for that, but there's other things that pop out to fans as well. Some of them are bound to be production errors, but it seems weird that they would all be production errors. And of course, the last question is, what happened to Torben Voller's eye? There are so many more questions I actually have, but I had to try to keep this as short as it makes sense to do in this format. So I'm going to end it there. Let me know what questions you have. Let me know what you think about my questions. How did you feel about the whole Martha from Another World twist when it happened? If I'm honest, at first I really didn't enjoy it. I didn't say, oh, the whole thing's ruined and get pissed or anything, but it wasn't what I was expecting, and it took a little while to set in. Of course, knowing that there's only 3 seasons planned and that they have an endpoint in mind really helps in that regard. But what do you think? Tell me in the comments, tell me what you want to see as far as new videos about Dark. We got about a year until we're going to see any more episodes, so I'm interested to hear what you think. Please like the video if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.